Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of P.A.S. Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you can join me today. So much craziness in this world. We're witnessing what's going on the streets. And I warned last week, the summer of 2024, it's probably going to outpace the summer of 2020 with the insanity that we're witnessing. But if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you subscribe and follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the PAS Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with others. We have to inform them about the issues because we are on a precipice. We're at a critical juncture here in the United States and in American history. We stand at an inflection point, right? And it's a moment where the very essence of what it means to be American hangs in the balance. And it's not necessarily just here in America. We're witnessing this throughout the entire Western world. People need to wake up to the reality because we have to confront an uncomfortable truth. America is in the throes of an identity crisis, and we are at risk of losing this country. In the words of President Biden, this is not hyperbole. Just look at what's going on throughout the United States. Look at the mindset. Look at the cultural decay and rot that exists for decades. We've witnessed a steady erosion of the values that once defined us as a nation, the pillars of our society, freedom, liberty, the concept of justice. Yet they've all been undermined by this pervasive culture of decay. And are we now at that tipping point? Well, it seems that way. We've been able to overcome a lot in our history. We've been at these points before and we overcame. And it seems that we're at the tipping point, and the answer is going to lie in a combination of factors. We have this profound lack of leadership here in the United States. Our elected officials have failed us. Our appointed officials have failed us. They've abandoned the principles that once guided our nation, and they've done it in favor of their own self-interest. They've done it because of the elitist mindset. They've done it in pursuit of power. They are so far removed from the problems of ordinary Americans that they can no longer relate to what we face. But it's also because they have disdain for the very people that they've sworn to serve. They have little regard for us. See, they believe that we are too dumb to know what's in our best interest, that we're too stupid to understand what's in the best interest of our families and our communities. And it's because of this exact reason that they have become so much more authoritarian. It's why they don't even pretend to hide it anymore. They don't care about the people. Just think back to a few weeks ago when they passed the Ukrainian funding bill and they broke out the Ukrainian flags and they were all celebrating and cheering. When was the last time you saw that level of enthusiasm and they were doing something notable on behalf of the American people? When was it? I don't remember them ever expressing that level of enthusiasm. See, we don't have leaders anymore. We don't have statesmen. They don't exist. We have petty tyrants. We have petty tyrants that think they know best despite their utter incompetence. And they are incompetent. Just look at what's going on. Look around the world. Look in this country. Look at President Biden. I'm not trying to be mean, but is anyone really going to say that he's a statesman? Is anyone going to say that he inspires? And the answer is no. His own staff doesn't trust him. How many of you are aware that his campaign staff says that they are going to be limiting his appearances and they're not going to let him speak for longer than 7 minutes at a time? And this is supposed to be the leader of the free world, where he can't even speak for over 7 minutes? What are we doing here? And it's because of things like that this vacuum has formed. A void that has been eagerly filled by those seeking to dismantle the very foundations of our republic. We have this warped education system that has pushed this anti-American sentiment, and we're now witnessing the results of over 2 decades of a failed education system, because it's not just the crisis of leadership that we face. We are contending with insidious influences, communist ideologies, radical anti-Americanism, forces hell-bent on tearing down the United States from within. You have all these morons out there trying to protest. They claim they're pro-Palestinian. They're calling for a new intifada. They don't even know what intifada means, but it's a Marxist cultural revolution. They're the ones that are taking advantage, and they want to sow division and discord in our society. They want to pit Americans against Americans, and it's all for power and control. The real question is, where is everyone? Why is everyone such cowards? Yeah, there's some that speak out, but I'm talking about ordinary people. Too many of us have our heads buried in the sand. They think it's a fad. It's going to eventually will return to a sense of normalcy, that it's not possible that the United States collapses or becomes an authoritarian society. What these people don't realize is that the consequences of this societal detachment is dire. This detachment has led to the breakdown of standards throughout our entire society, a moral decay, a breakdown of the family unit, an abandonment of faith. It's created an entire generation where too many people believe they could do whatever the hell they want with impunity. And they don't even think about the consequences for themselves or for our society as a whole. I understand that things like X or Twitter, or whatever you want to call it, or Instagram, they're not real life. Not everyone lives on it. I get that. But when you see the videos of people just fighting in the streets, of people just bashing windows and destroying businesses, stealing, doing whatever they want, this is part of our culture, and we have to confront it head on. We can't lie. We can't sit there and ignore it anymore. Make no mistake, our society has been tribalized. It's been torn apart by those seeking to exploit our differences, our past, our history for their own gain. And the saddest part is that we've allowed it to happen. We've allowed a corrupt education system to poison the minds of millions of Americans who no longer really see themselves as Americans, who despise their own country. We become detached from each other as the technological revolution has advanced. We're strangers in our own country. And the only thing that actually unites us now is a shared sense of disillusionment and despair. However, we don't have to live this way. We have to confront the challenges before us. And there is hope. We are Americans. We have a history of overcoming our challenges. And this is our chance to reclaim the American identity, reaffirm our commitment to the values that define us as a nation. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode. I want to explore how we can rise to the challenge. I want to explain what's going on, examine strategies for combating these forces of cultural decay and rebuild the foundations of our republic. So everyone, hang tight, and I'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So as I said before the break, America is facing a critical inflection point, and we have to decide on which road we want to travel down. We have to delve deeper into this. But what we really need to do is define what is the American identity. See, I'm constantly talking about this idea of the American identity, and I've gotten several emails from the audience, and I got the greatest audience out there, people that are really engaged, asking, well, you're talking about the American identity, but what is the American identity? And how has its loss fueled this cultural revolution that we're witnessing? How is this loss of the American identity, how does it threaten to tear our nation apart? Now, at the core of the American identity lies a certain set of principles and values that guide us. And they've guided us as a nation since our inception. Okay, these include concepts like liberty, freedom, equality, individualism, family, faith, rule of law, justice. But what we've witnessed over the last several years is a concerning trend. It's an ignorance towards these ideas. And I'm not berating anyone out there, but we're constantly using the words liberty and freedom interchangeably. Well, why? They're two separate words for a reason, and what do they really mean? So take liberty. It's the natural condition of human beings wherein we get to express our free will responsibly in accord with the dictates of right reason, natural law. And so what does freedom mean? Well, freedom is the ability that we could exercise our liberties in our society. We need to know these things because the key driver of losing the American identity is the lack of knowledge and appreciation for our nation's history and the founding principles. And there's far too many Americans out there that lack a basic understanding of the sacrifices made by previous generations to secure our freedoms. We see just how ignorant people are. People are unaware of the principles upon which our Constitution was built and the ideals that shaped our national character. And you don't have to look far to see the ignorance that exists. Just look at what's going on the colleges, campuses, and that's spread out and now infected all aspects of our society. You have these morons, these absolute imbeciles out there that are calling for an intifada, the pro-Hamas, they spout anti-Americanism. Do they really believe that they would be better off under a system that Hamas controls? I mean, is this the logic they're going to use? Is this how dumb that the generations have really become? How dumbed down people are that they can't think critically? You have the irony of people saying queers for Palestine, trans for Palestine. Do any of these idiots understand Sharia law at all? But see, that's the problem. This ignorance leaves so many susceptible to manipulation by those with ulterior motives. These protests are not spur of the moment. They're not organic. They're not people that are really passionate about this issue. The amazing part is, and I'm not trying to be mean. I'm really trying hard not to. Okay, but I'm sorry. You're going to sit there and dictate to me about the whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Meanwhile, you never even picked up a damn book about the conflict. Just shut up. I don't want to hear from you. Your opinion is irrelevant to me because you have no basis for that opinion. You have no understanding of the dynamics of international relations. You have no understanding of the dynamics of politics and war. These people are loons. They're spoiled, self-entitled brats. And it's not just young adults. I'm talking about older adults as well. See, it's not just, a lot of people like to bash the younger generations, and I do sometimes too, but I'll also bash my generation and the older generations, because let's be honest here, how many people could really pass a basic citizenship exam? People that have been living here their whole lives. How many Americans have actually read the United States Constitution? Most of my audience has, but the vast majority of Americans haven't. We need to recognize that, and we need to recognize how easily people are swayed by false narratives and misguided ideologies. Just look at what took place during the coronavirus and all the sheep who just did what they were told, who were willing to give up their liberties without asking any questions because it was a pandemic. So now you look at Marxism, for example, and this term is often bandied about without any true understanding of its meaning. Again, those that actually preach Marxist principles, they have no idea what Marxism is. It's about capitalism, anti-capitalist, blah, blah, blah. Well, Marxism at its core is revolutionary. It's a revolutionary socialist ideology. It wants to overthrow capitalism, and they've been successful. Let's be honest about it. Anyone that's out there that sits there and tells me that America is a capitalist country, well, you apparently haven't been paying attention. Out of all the free countries that exist out there, the American economy is actually heavily regulated. It's one of the most heavily regulated economies in the world. People will be like, the Democrat socialist nations, the Scandinavian nations, the Nordic nations. Those aren't democratic socialist countries. In fact, they're more capitalist than we are. That's how ignorant these people are. See, the Marxists, they didn't succeed when it came to creating class warfare. They weren't able to be successful. But they have been able to be successful using racial warfare, using diversity, equity, and inclusion, dividing us into groups and then pitting us against each other. That's where they've been successful. And now they're starting to make inroads with the class aspect of it. The radical Marxists, the ones that actually are intelligent, those are the ones that you have to be fearful of because they're smart people. And I don't think most of those that are sitting there subscribing to Marxist ideology, I don't think they grasp the real destructive consequences of implementing such a system. We've seen it. It's never worked. All it does is lead to despair. All it does is lead to death and destruction. So we've seen it historically fail, and then we see it in practice fail. And unfortunately, because there's so many Americans that don't know a damn thing about their own country, it's created fertile ground for the seeds of cultural revolution to take root. And that's what we're witnessing heading into the summer of 2020. We are living through a cultural revolution, that there's a group of people, and it's not a small group, it's a significant group that seeks to dismantle the foundations of our society. And they prey upon this ignorance. They talk about social justice. Yet all they do is sow the seeds of division and discord. However, we can do something about it. We don't have to sit there and accept the current status quo. We don't have to sit there and just stand as bystanders as our nation collapses, as we collapse culturally. And a lot of it starts with education. And I'm not talking about education just in schools. Obviously, I focus on schools a lot. But I'm talking about education in our communities, in our homes. We have to instill a deep appreciation for the principles that make America great. We have to say out loud, we can't be cowards. We have to say out loud that American exceptionalism is real and that we're damn proud of it. We have to confront the false narratives, the false ideologies that want to tear us apart, which means that we have to engage with each other. We have to engage in open and honest dialogue. We have to challenge the BS narratives that are coming from the left, challenge the BS narratives that are being pushed on our college campuses, that are being pushed in the K through 12 system, that are being pushed in corporate America, mostly that are being pushed by the government bureaucracy itself. We have to hold our leaders accountable. And if they're not willing to uphold the values upon which our nation was founded, they need to get out of office. We need to throw them out of office. People like Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, that has very little respect for the United States of America, that would be someone that's willing to implement Sharia law here in the United States. How can you have those from within that despise their own country represent their country? How do you think that's going to work out? And if we're creating a generation of students that are steeped in anti-American ideology, well, one day they're going to be the ones that have to lead this nation. How can they lead a country they despise? So we have to understand the American identity is very important, and it's not defined by our differences. It's defined by the ideals that unite us as a nation. That's the difference between what's going on today and what took place 60, 70 years ago. People try and compare it to what happened during Vietnam and the discord that we were seeing during the Vietnam era and the civil rights era. But there's a difference. See, back then, people still had an appreciation for the United States. Those that despised the United States, they were minuscule. It was a handful. It wasn't a big deal. But after 50 years of this failed education system, what we're witnessing is that the thing that once united us, we might have disagreed on the issues, but we were united in our founding and our appreciation for the founding fathers, even though they, as imperfect as they were united in the core ideals that define the American identity. Well, today that's lost. We don't have that anymore. And that's what makes it dangerous today. You know, I keep on thinking back to one of the first interview episodes that I did on this podcast. It was episode 88, Barbara from Harlem. And if you never listened to that episode, I suggest you do. Sadly, Barbara from Harlem passed away towards the end of last year, and it was a real loss for the United States. But in that conversation, it was really remarkable. She was someone that actually attended segregated schools. She lived during the Jim Crow era. She lived during segregation. And Barbara explained how even though she went to a segregated school, she was taught in that school to still love this country. That this country, the opportunities it provides, is greater than anywhere else in the world. Now think about that for a second. Here is a school where people are actually being racially discriminated against, where you did see systemic, institutionalized racism within our society, and yet they were still taught to have a love and appreciation for this country. They still believed in the vision of America, even though they didn't have equality at that time. And it's such a profound difference than the spoiled, self-entitled brats of today. But we're going to talk about why this is so important when we get back from this quick break. So hang tight. I'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, talked about Barbara from Harlem, episode 88. Make sure you check it out, and how they lived under segregation, and yet they were still taught a love and appreciation of this country because they understood what the American identity was, how it shaped our nation's history and values. And that's what makes the Founding Fathers remarkable. And the Founding Fathers are not a one-size-fits-all, right? Everyone tries to lump them. The way the left portrays it and the way our education system portrays it is that these were a bunch of rich old white men that had slaves, which couldn't be further from the truth. We need to know who the Founding Fathers were and how the Founding Fathers did to challenge the status quo, where they risked everything to establish a nation where governments exist to serve the people and not the other way around. See, they laid the groundwork for a society where individuals could exercise their free wills responsibly. And they're going to be guided by this idea of natural law. The concept of liberty is not merely a privilege. It is a natural right. It is a natural state, a right bestowed upon us by a higher power, God-given liberties. And they were willing to fight for it. They were willing to sacrifice everything. Listen, there were some Founding Fathers that were privileged. There were Founding Fathers that were wealthy. They had ties to the British circle. They were accepted in British society. They were the elite of our society. But they had a common vision. They had a dedication to this idea of liberty. And they fought for it. They fought for it. Now, do you think that the Founding Fathers, they weren't stupid people? They knew they were going up against the most powerful military that the world has seen at that point. They understood that the chances of winning the American Revolution were nil. Yet they did it anyway. They put their names on the Declaration of Independence. Now, what would have happened if Britain won? Do you think they would have gotten off with a slap on the wrist? King George saying, we'll let bygones be bygones, just don't do it again? Or do you think they would have faced one of the most brutal deaths, yet they were willing to put it all on the line because they weren't cowards? They were born as men, and they died as statesmen. They wanted us to be able to voice our opinions without fear of persecution. They wanted us to protest for causes that we care about. Not destroy buildings, not threaten, assault, and harass other people, not impede people's ability to travel freely. They wanted us to protest against the government and government abuses. They wanted us to practice any religion that we wanted to practice. They wanted us to bear arms, not for aggression, not to go hunting. They wanted us to bear arms for protection against a tyrannical government. Basically, they wanted us to have the unalienable right to live our lives according to our own conscience, free from interference by the government. And our founders understood the delicate balance between liberty and order. They recognized that too much freedom, it leads to chaos, excessive control, tyranny. And so they crafted a system that's designed to preserve individual liberties, and it maintains societal order. Unfortunately, over the years, though, since we have forgotten what liberty really is, too often we've allowed the government to do it at once, chipping away at our liberties. And now the government has grown so powerful that it allows some people to do whatever the hell it wants while it targets other people because those people dare to challenge narratives. We had federalism, where the Founding Fathers built in safeguards to protect the people from the system, to protect the system from the people, to protect the system from the system, and the people from the people. And there was checks and balances. But the safeguards are now starting to buckle. We don't have independent states. We have states that have become reliant on the federal government, where the federal government bullies them. The federal government has expanded its power and reach into every single policy area you could think of. And even though our two levels of government are supposed to be distinct from each other, they don't look very distinct. But the power is not supposed to reside with the government. It's supposed to reside with the people, we the people, who consented to be governed under the rule of law. Yet over time, as we turned our back on these principles, Great Depression, you could start there, right? You look at the Great Depression and the amount of government intervention in society. You look at 9/11, that was another big movement. When 9/11 happened, that was a major catalyst for a lot of what we're witnessing today, where people freely gave up their rights and their liberties in the name of national security. Well, if you're not doing anything wrong, why do you oppose the Patriot Act? Fast forward to the idea of the Great Recession, and we provide bailouts to all these big banks. Do you notice that after we provide those bailouts, after we gave that money to those banks, that those banks became deeply embedded in social issues to try and push a social agenda, even closing down their accounts against social causes that they don't believe in or that they oppose? You look at the election of the former president, Donald Trump, in 2016, and you look at how the bureaucracy, they were unhappy with the people's decision. They didn't like the way that people voted, and they deemed that Trump was unworthy of political office. So they would do everything in their power to try and take him down. And think about the destruction and division that caused. Then you look at the coronavirus, and we saw what happened with the coronavirus, where you had these little Mussolini wannabes implementing their totalitarian decrees without any real regard for our fundamental liberties, no regard for their state legislative bodies to get advice from them and have debate and dialogue. Instead, they ruled as if they were the rulers of a country like China. Sure, China was far more extreme in their tactics, but when you look at the very essence of authoritarianism, where decisions are made by one or a handful of people, it was no different. We saw what happened in the summer of 2020, where people were allowed to take over property, destroy things, burn down police stations, no real charges. How many dozens were murdered? How many businesses went out of business because of the BLM riots? Then you see what's happening with the January 6th thing, right? Complete opposite. There, the government was going to drop the hammer. They were going to start charging anyone and everyone that was even in their vicinity, regardless of whether they engaged in any criminal activity. We're going to label it an insurrection, that it was an attempt to overthrow government. A couple of hours of a day, a moment in time that didn't repeat itself, and yet you look at it and people have been thrown in prisons, trials still haven't happened. People with just basic loitering charges, trespassing charges have had to go to jail. Yet, burn down a police station, you're all good. Amazing, right? Really amazing. And now we're seeing what's taking place. We're heading into the summer of 2024. And I said last week, it's only going to get worse. It's going to get worse as the fifth generation warfare continues, as it's being carried out and expands. And I'll explain what fifth generation warfare is next week. But in the meantime, now more than ever, we need good people to stand up and reclaim the mantle of leadership. We need people to stand up and say no more. We're not going to allow it anymore. You have to cast aside cowardice. And I'm not even talking about leadership in political office. I'm not even talking about the appointed officials. I'm talking about ordinary Americans just standing up and saying enough. We're not dealing with this nonsense anymore. We're not dealing with this BS anymore. We have to cast aside the cowardice that has been pushed into our society out of fear that we're going to get canceled, we're going to get ostracized and criticized. But as the people have become silent, the cultural decay has increased. It's gained ground. So everyone needs to embrace the courage to confront the challenges that we're facing right now. When it comes to the elected and appointed officials, we need leaders who understand the importance of statesmanship, individuals who prioritize the people over their BS self-interest, who are willing to sit there and bridge, really tackle the problems that we face, but also be honest with the American people and explain to them that government isn't the answer, that government is not the be-all, end-all, that government can't really fix the problems that we're facing, that it has to come from within. We need to defang the government, in fact. See, true statesmanship requires integrity, humility, honesty, but also a commitment to the principles of limited government that have guided us in our founding. We need to reduce the size and scope of government, return power to the hands of the people where it rightfully belongs. When we look at the excessive government that we're witnessing, well, what has it done? The only thing it's done is breed dependency and led to a loss of our liberty, an undermining of the very freedoms that we hold dear. Our destiny is in our own hands. We have the power to shape the course of history, and we have the power to safeguard this concept of liberty, the one place where it actually works. And so we should rise to that challenge, rise to it with courage and resolve, because I know that it's not about me. Okay, I've already lived beyond half my life. But I want my children to grow up in America that I remember. Or we could do nothing and just keep on with this decline that we're witnessing. The choice is ours. Now, I think I ranted on long enough. If you found the content of this episode informative, please share it with other people. Take 30 seconds to write a review on any podcast platform that allows it. Also, give it a 5-star rating. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back on Monday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.